Hi everyone, welcome to today's edition of the English We Speak in Nigeria. I'm your regular host, Dr. Kachi is my name. And on today's edition, we have a big masquerade. Yes, we have a special guest. And there we have Dr. Kingsley Ugwanyi, who is a Nigerian English scholar. In fact, his doctoral thesis at Northumbria University, Newcastle, UK, was on Nigerian English. Yes, and he is also a consultant to Oxford Dictionary, English Oxford Dictionary on Nigerian English. You can see that this guy is a professional in Nigerian English, and then we are happy to have him today to look at a number of issues that very many of you are having issues with. And one of them on our list here is there any difference between Nigerian English and grammatical error? So we have a number of other questions that Mr. Kingsley is going to answer. This particular episode is going to answer this question. Yes. Dr. Kingsley, over to you.
Talking about your second question. What's the difference between Nigerian English and grammatical errors? Well, this is a question that nearly everybody asks. A colleague of mine, a lecturer in Nigerian University, asked me this question actually. And he's a lecturer of English. So even professors and some lecturers of English in Nigeria still have a lot of doubts about what Nigerian English is, and some people simply say Nigerian English is an error. Just grammatical errors. It's understandable why some people think so, but let me say this: Nigerian English, and of course any other New English as they are called. We talk about Jamaican English, Indian English, Philippine English. All these other Englishes that are not coming from the traditional centers of English. And what are these traditional centers of English? The UK and the US, and possibly you may want to add Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and some parts of South Africa, right? And so this question is not just asked about Nigeria or Nigerian English. It is asked in every new contexts of English, like India, Jamaica, or any of the other ones I've mentioned. And yes, there's a difference. It's not everything anybody says in Nigeria is passes as Nigerian English and is therefore there are still errors. Error is still there. And depending on your level of proficiency, people make error. There are learner errors in English, in any language for that matter. So we cannot take that away, and we need to make that very clear. Then what then is, how then do we know when, of course we know that new features of a language, some of them do emerge from errors of usage, right? But some of them also emerge, most of them actually emerge from people trying to name things, to provide names for things that the English language didn't have. Remember when the English language was implanted in Nigeria, it came from a place that is outside us. So there were names of things, names of behaviors, names of traditional cultures, names of means of transportation that this language didn't have. But the language has met those phenomena in the new context, and those phenomena have to be named. And this is very, very important. For example, one means of transportation we call Okada, for example, the British do not have what we call Okada, all right? So some say commercial motorcyclist. Oh, that's fine, all right? But even here in the UK, motorcycle is not normally used as for commercial purposes. So people still struggle to understand that, even if but we have a name for it, which is Okada. And practically every Nigerian knows Okada when you say it. So that is an example. So that means of transportation, which the English language did not have and has met in Nigeria, needed to be named, and that is the name we give it. And that's an example of it doesn't have to be bad English. No, that's not. But names of things practically is very, very important. But then, how do we now distinguish between error and a feature of Nigerian English? Now, I'm going to I'm going to quote Ayo Bangboshe, who is a prominent Nigerian linguist who is globally known, globally cited. His work in this regard is one of the most cited work globally in the world English context about the difference between errors. He discusses how do we know innovation, a linguistic innovation, from error, and he provides five criteria or five factors, all right, which, if an innovative usage of English, if this innovative usage meets these five factors, then we can call it a feature of that rather than error. And he says number one is demographic, number two is geographical, number three is authoritative, and number four is codification, and then acceptability, and then acceptability factors. These are the five factors. I'll explain briefly. It says demographic. Demographic simply says how many people use it. All right. If a particular usage is something that you hear just a few people use, all right, then it is probably just error because those people haven't learned how to use the right one in quote. All right. But if you feel that most people use it, practically everyone says it. I just gave an example, Okada. Practically everybody says Okada, isn't it? So in terms of that criterion of demography, the demography, people who use it, it is practically everybody. Then do we have a specific number? No. But if you judge that, if you say a particular expression, for example, next tomorrow, all right, that's another Nigerian English expression. Next tomorrow. Most people say just next tomorrow. When am I going to see you? I'll see you next tomorrow. All right. Some people do say I'll see you the day after tomorrow. But then, how many people say the day after tomorrow as against people who say next tomorrow? If the number for next tomorrow is higher, then that is a new feature emerging there. Then the second factor is geographical. What is the geographical spread? If you're talking about a feature of Nigerian English, is it just a feature you hear somewhere in Jos, or only in Lagos, or just somewhere in Kaduna, or just somewhere in Enugu? All right. If that is the case, then it means that feature is not geographically spread. All right. But if you use a word or a phrase or an expression, and people will understand what that word means across the parts of that country, all right, then that is a feature emerging. If it is something you are here only in perhaps in Enugu, for example, then perhaps that is just Igbo English, as people might call it. All right. Then the third criterion or factor there is authoritative factor. The authoritative factor, that is who uses it. Who uses it? Who? That is, what is the status of the people who use these expressions? Are they just people who barely have education? All right, people who just work as area boys, or people who just work as agberos? And these are I'll just tell you that the agbero is one of the words that we've added, an area boy as well, and one of the Nigerian English words we just added to the OED that's going to come out very soon. All right. So, or do you also hear people who are fairly educated, like people who finish secondary school or even university graduates, speaking this? That if that is the case, then that is likely an emerging variety, because you might say that if the people who are uneducated are using it, the reason might be that their level of proficiency in English is low, isn't it? So these are learner errors, right? But if people who are fairly well educated, like a university graduate in Nigeria, and most Nigerian graduates say, "I'll see you next tomorrow," okay? Or flash me and I'll save your number. That's typical Nigerian English, right? Flash me, you have a number, just flash me and I'll save your number. Typical Nigerian English. Do graduates say it? Yes. So if that is the case, then some people will say beep, give me a beep, blah. There are a couple of options, but most Nigerians, I am pretty sure, will say, including educated Nigerians, will say flash me. All right. Then where, in what context, in what usage context? That's the fourth factor now, is codification. In what usage contexts, all right, are these expressions found? For example, are they just found in informal conversations, or can they be found in formal conversations? Do people use it? Do you hear it, for example, when people give write in newspapers, on radio stations? You hear it on TV news stations. You hear it in fairly formal contexts. All right, and I'm sure most of these we do hear them in fairly formal context, or not just informal. All right, but even if they do appear only in informal context, you can just say, okay, these are informal Nigerian English, because it's still being used, isn't it? So it is good that we find, even if it's predominantly found in informal context, but also sometimes people use it in formal context. That is still evidence. Something like Okada is something you hear people say, like someone casting the news, for example, on the TV would ordinarily say Okada, right? Okada riders, as we say, and presumably every Nigerian understands what that means. All right, so that is the fourth. And the fifth factor there is, what is the attitude acceptability? What is the attitude of users and non-users to it? All right, so the people demonstrate good attitude or negative attitude. That is actually where my own research lies. That's what I've been doing. What kind of attitudes do Nigerians have towards Nigerian English? And my findings from my PhD actually, well, generally speaking, were positive. So many Nigerians demonstrated positive attitudes towards Nigerian English, especially when you ask them about that indirectly, when you measure this attitude indirectly. But when you ask people directly, they tended to express some negative attitudes. But there are still negative. People say, there's nothing like Nigerian English. Nigerian English is error. But this is our understanding. So if the attitudes towards that variety, towards that usage in particular, is negative, then it is likely going to impact on the acceptability of that. If it is positive, therefore, it's going to positively impact on it. So these are the 5 factors which I would use to differentiate between an error and an emerging or emerged grammatically correct, or feature rather, of a new variety of English, in this case Nigerian English. I hope this helps to explain your question, and I hope I haven't taken too much time. And that's that. Thank you so much, and I'll move on to the next question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kingsley Wine. That was an exhaustive response. Thank you so much. Okay, we want to have your views. What do you think about this discussion? Please comment here, like, and subscribe. Okay, look out for another episode. It's coming your way soon. Thank you.